Can you trigger an avalanche? You sure can. I'm Eddie Bauer, Alpine climbing guide, Angela Hawse, and these are some of the most asked questions about avalanche safety. What is an avalanche and what causes them? An avalanche is a mass of snow that typically moves down a mountain slope at a high speed, entraining other snow, sometimes trees, rocks, mud, other debris with it at an alarming rate. Any type of trigger can cause an avalanche when the load exceeds the capacity of the strength. So could be a person, could be wildlife, could be rock fall or wind loading on a slope from snow being entrained in the wind coming from the opposite side. So there's a number of different ways that avalanches can start. Why is avalanche safety so important? Anytime that we are in the mountains, when they're covered with snow, avalanches are a hazard. And so it's incredibly important that, one, that we carry the right equipment so we could conduct a companion rescue if our friends or another party got into an avalanche. And two, so we could be found. Are there different types of avalanches? There sure are. There are a number of different types of avalanches, such as slab avalanches, wind slab avalanches, hard slab avalanches, soft slab avalanches, storm snow avalanches, loose snow avalanches, wet snow avalanches, glide avalanches. I'm probably missing one or two. So yeah, lots of different types of snow avalanches. Where do avalanches typically occur? Avalanches typically occur on slopes that are above 28 to 30 degrees. Locations where avalanches occur are generally stripped bare of trees and vegetation. In the spring, the avalanches that can occur on much lower angled slopes are also very time dependent. So in the morning, when it's nice and cold and the snowpack's frozen, you have a lot of stability. And then as the temperatures start to warm throughout the day, the water starts to percolate down through the snowpack, saturating the snowpack with water, which leads to avalanches when you have a less consolidated snowpack. And so spring avalanches are much more predictable than a winter avalanche, but both are easily avoidable. What are tips on reading terrain? So slope angles are absolutely critical to know when you're exploring an avalanche terrain, because once you get above the 28-degree level in a winter snowpack, an avalanche could occur. A lot of, there's some apps out there that you can use to look at the slope angle based on angling your phone. It'll act like an inclinometer and give you the actual degrees. Avalanches can also occur in tree-covered areas. It's less common. That destruction often happens on the uphill side of the tree. So what'll happen is you'll see this flagging effect where there's no branches on the upside of the tree, but the downside of the tree has healthy branches. And that's called flagging. And that's a clear sign of avalanche paths. What gear is useful for avalanche safety? There's three components of avalanche safety gear that you need to have if you're out in the backcountry. One's an avalanche transceiver. An avalanche transceiver is a tool that emits a signal that is retrievable in the event of an avalanche. If you're buried in an avalanche, that is going to help your partners locate you very quickly if they've practiced with their transceiver. The other tool that's critical is an avalanche probe. An avalanche probe helps you pinpoint the exact location once you've located a signal in a buried person when their avalanche transceiver has been found. So then you deploy your avalanche shovel, which is your third essential piece of avalanche equipment, to start digging for that buried victim. There's other things that are useful. Certainly avalanche airbags are useful. A cell phone's pretty critical in the event of an emergency. It's not a bad idea to have a personal locator beacon, which is something like a spot device or a Garmin DeLorme, a basic first aid kit. basic repair kit, and then an emergency blanket, just a little lightweight, little emergency blanket you can get at any sporting goods store, is a nice thing to have in the bottom of your pack, because in the event that someone is buried in an avalanche, they're likely to be hypothermic. Can you trigger an avalanche? You sure can. Like we said before, avalanches can be triggered by a number of ways. Certainly, human-triggered avalanches are probably one of the most common. There's a number of ways that people can trigger an avalanche. Typically, it's by skiing over a roll. That's where people run into a little bit of an issue judging slope angles when you start out with a roll, and that's a very common place to trigger an avalanche, is the start of that. Avalanches can also be triggered intentionally by highway forecasters, state patrol, to help mitigate the risk. What are the first steps when you feel like you're going to get caught in an avalanche? Critical. Think quickly. Do what you can to gain speed so you can actually gain some momentum so you can ski off to the side. And so it's important before you even enter avalanche terrain that you have an exit strategy. Think on your feet, try to jettison your ski poles. If you're caught in the avalanche, what you want to do is try to swim. You want to try to swim upstream. You want to just keep moving, because if you lay limp, you're most likely to end up in the bottom of the snow slope. If you're in treed terrain, grab a tree. That's probably one of your best things to do if you're caught in an avalanche and there's trees around you. It could be really difficult to discern what's up and what's down. Once the avalanche stops, if your head's not above the snow, the way that you want to react is, first you want to get your hands as close as you can as your mouth and create an air pocket, because what's going to happen is your breath is going to encase an ice layer around your face, which is going to make it difficult to breathe. Most people die from avalanches through asphyxiation. So you want to make that air pocket around your face with your hands, or put your elbow up and just try to create that. And with the other hand, push it up where you think is the up direction, because if you're close to the surface, your hand might just get through, and then your partners can see that and go right to you. How does an avalanche airbag work? Avalanche airbags work on the theory that it's kind of a sorting theory, that larger things are going to float to the surface. So if we're stuck in an avalanche, we're pretty dense. And a lot of times, larger slab avalanches are going to have blocks of snow, and all these things are going to push us towards the bottom. What happens when an airbag's deployed correctly is it's going to help you float to the surface through that sorting event, where larger things are typically going to float to the top. There's a couple of different airbags on the market. They're all very expensive, and they should never be used as a tool to think that you can ski avalanche terrain safely, right? It doesn't make skiing avalanche terrain really any safer. It just increases the odds of survival if you are stuck in an avalanche. Are avalanche airbags reusable? You betcha. They are reusable by refilling the canister, if you've got the canister model, or they're reusable through recharging the battery-powered airbags that, the end of the tour, come back home, make sure that you're drying the airbag out well, plug it in, recharge it, make sure it's getting a full charge, roll the airbag back up, and you're ready to go. What are some red flags to look out for with avalanches? Big red flags are being with a group that's maybe not the best match for your risk tolerance level. You need to speak up, and you need to make sure that you haven't gotten yourself into a situation that's getting worse and worse, and you're unable to retreat from that situation. And a lot of this can be prevented by having a conversation with your group that you're going out skiing with, deciding what terrain you're going to be comfortable skiing that day, Red flags are powder fever. We get out there and the skiing's great. And we just like get this addiction to the powder. And it's such an incredible sensation that we want more. It's just like any fix. You just want more. Other red flags are skiing in areas that are really popular and having parties jump in from above. That's a situation that would be a red flag for me. And I would make sure that I either communicated with that group above to make sure I know what their plan is, or I go and find a different way out. The most important thing is to come home at the end of the day. What is an avalanche transceiver? Great question. An avalanche transceiver is a device that backcountry skiers all wear that emits a low frequency signal of like 457 megahertz that is emitting the same signal as every other backcountry skier out there. How they work is they emit a regular signal on a frequency and a regularity that is picked up by another avalanche transceiver. Does it matter what kind of batteries do I need in my transceiver? It absolutely does. And there are types of batteries that avalanche transceivers use are either a lithium battery or an alkaline battery. And an alkaline battery is much more common. A lithium battery has a particular setting on your transceiver, and not all avalanche transceivers even work with lithium batteries. So it's critical to know what battery type the manufacturer recommends for your particular transceiver, and that you always keep your batteries fairly fresh. When my batteries get down to say like 40%, I change them out. How do I choose an avalanche transceiver? It basically depends on what kind of user you are. If you're a recreational user or a professional user. I like to have an avalanche transceiver that has a lot of different options for different scenarios that I might get in as a professional. For people that are possibly dealing with multiple burials, which would be more like a professional scenario, the ability to switch between analog and digital helps in the event of deep burials, multiple burials, and complex scenarios. Now, most recreational users are going to be better served by a simpler beacon, which has a good reputation, which is from a respected brand, and one that you research. What are your friends using? Do they like their transceiver? What are the reviews online? What are the manufacturers? Are there recalls on particular beacons? Whatever brand that you do choose, you want to make sure to follow the manufacturer's specifications, to send it in, to have it checked, generally every 3 to 5 years. Oftentimes, there's software updates that are important. Don't buy used beacons. Don't buy old beacons. Where do I find and how do I decipher avalanche forecasts? The go-to website where you can find all the avalanche information centers across the country is called avalanche.org. And it's a nonprofit organization that has a number of resources on there that can help you target your own and your closest avalanche information center. There's a number of things that you'll find on these sites. And one is going to be what the hazard is for the day and that's going to be on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being low, 5 being extreme. Then there'll be specific details as to aspect, which would be like north, south, east, west, northwest, east, northeast, all these different things, and elevation. And as the weather impacts a mountainous area, often the distribution of snow is going to be very different around these different zones. So that's where you can get the specifics on where there might be a wind slab, where there might be a soft slab or storm slab, where you might find loose snow avalanches. And most of these forecasts have little icons that might look like a question mark that you can click on it to learn what each particular definition is. It's a great way to just kind of study avalanche phenomena and getting familiar with the terminology and tracking that over time. What do you do if your partner gets caught in an avalanche? Respond quickly. You have to get your cell phone out, make a call, 911. Even if you don't have cell reception, try calling 911 because oftentimes you'll get patched through. Second thing is survey the debris. Do you see your partner? Is there a glove or a pole or anything sticking up? And if so, go right to that and mark it if it's not the person. The next thing you want to do is make sure that your avalanche transceiver is turned to receive, and then you need to conduct a search based on a grid, which is based on the resolution or the distance that your avalanche transceiver can pick up a signal. And then anytime you get a signal, you want to mark where that is. You want to quickly go into the next mode, which would be a slower mode. So that first section would be called the primary search, and that's conducted usually fairly quickly. You're probably still on your skis or your snowboard, so you can move quickly to get down to that 10-meter resolution. And once we get down to 10 meters, that's called the airplane search or the fine search. And we're going to go into that search much slower, but still moving quickly toward and just following exactly what your avalanche transceiver is telling you to do. It's going to give you an arrow that's going to point to the direction it wants you to go, and it's going to give you a distance indicating how far you are away from that signal. We want to mark that maybe with your ski pole, take your backpack off, get your probe out, and that's where we start doing a circular motion, probing the snow, looking for a ski boot, a chest, a head, whatever. And with our shovel, we want to step back just a little bit from the probe and just start digging like crazy. It's the hardest part of the search. Once that all happens, you might have to conduct some first aid. You might need to do mouth to mouth, depending on the severity. You might need to remove a snow plug from the victim. I know this all sounds awful, and it is. Hopefully, you'll never get into the situation that you have to use these skills, but you'll get out there and practice them in case you ever do. What are some tips on shoveling techniques for moving snow quickly? That is a great question. Avalanche debris sets up like concrete, and it's extremely important, one, that you have a good shovel that's a metal blade, and two, that you're trying to not use more energy than you need. So that would, what using more energy than you need would be actually like scooping the snow up and throwing it over your head. That's using extra energy that you need to extract your partner. So the best shoveling techniques are like a paddling technique where you're actually like moving the snow down the hill without picking it up. You're actually like paddling through the snow. If the snow is extremely hard, you're going to have to do a cut block technique where you're going to have to like jump onto your shovel, kick it with your foot, like section out like a cube of snow, and then you're going to have to lever that out. Can you dig yourself out of an avalanche? Pretty unlikely. It depends on the snow. If it's a slab avalanche where the snow is very consolidated, virtually impossible. If it's a loose snow avalanche where the snow is less consolidated, that would be possible to dig yourself out. Of course, it depends on your head being above the surface. If your head's below the surface and your arms are trapped in the snow, you're not going to be able to dig yourself out. Again, the most important thing is to create that air pocket with your hands, with your elbow in front of your face. What checkpoints do you go through before going into the mountain? One, I look at the avalanche forecast. Generally, the night before, if I know I'm going out for a backcountry tour, I'm going to get all my gear sorted. I'm going to talk to my partners, and we're going to determine who's going to carry a first aid kit, who's going to carry a repair kit, who's going to carry, if we're going to carry a rescue sled, those types of things. So we're not all like being redundant with what we're carrying. We come up with a plan. And then in the morning, the checks for me are getting food on board and then checking the avalanche forecast and the weather forecast. When we get to the trailhead or the car park, once we all get our personal gear together and we're ready to go, we do a beacon check. How do you test the stability of a snowpath before going down? There's a number of different ways that you can test the stability of a snow slope before going down. And a lot of these involve more advanced training with techniques like digging a snow pit, evaluating the different layers, conducting a few snow pit tests in there to look for weaknesses in the snowpack. But in general, the things that I'm going to use for testing a slope before going down are looking at slopes that are similar elevation and aspect all around me, and making sure that I don't see any signs of recent avalanche activity. Knowing the history of any recent avalanche activities. There's tests that are more advanced, such as ski cutting, that ski patrollers do on a regular basis, but they do involve risk, and it's basically exposing a skier to go across the starting zone or the top of an avalanche path at a high speed, aiming for a safe zone on the other side and attempting to compress the slope or put a sudden load on it to see if we can get it to release. How fast can avalanches move? Can you out-ski an avalanche? Another great question. Avalanches can move from it's probably as slow as 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour with a wet slab avalanche on a low angled slope to as fast as over 200 miles an hour. It really depends on how heavy the snow is, how much moisture is in the snow, and then it also depends on the steepness of the slope and the amount of snow that's entrained in the avalanche as to how fast it's going to go. Those were some of your most asked questions about avalanche safety. Feel free to send us your other questions if you're more curious about other things in the outdoors, and feel free to like us and subscribe for more videos like this.